بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the world. Peace and blessings upon our Prophet, our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to his family and to his companions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Barakallahu feekum, jazakum khairan. May Allah bless everyone, may Allah reward everyone for attending the event. So for today's event, the talk is titled Zakat, and as we've mentioned, the theme for this semester is to discuss the 5 pillars of Islam, and we're on the 3rd pillar, which is Zakat. And the speaker for today is Ustadh Usama. So just to give a short introduction, the Ustadh completed his bachelor's degree in accounting at Temple University. Ustadh then went abroad to study in Medina al-Munawwar in Saudi Arabia at the prestigious Islamic University of Medina, where he spent 6 years achieving a degree in Sharia and covering traditional texts with scholars in Masjid al-Nabawi. In addition, he completed a postgraduate certification in Islamic chaplaincy from Masjid al-Nabawi. Ustadh Usama received his master's degree in Islamic finance from the INCEIF University in Malaysia and currently works as a Sharia consultant for Adil Advisory in Wangsa Maju. And without further ado, inshallah, I'll pass it to the Ustadh. Ustadh, jazakum khairan for making time to be with us. Barakallahu feekum.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear respected brothers and sisters, first and foremost, barakallahu feekum, thank you very much for having me and joining us on this beloved night in coming together and learning more about the deen. But before I begin, I would just like to request the brothers to come forward, inshallah. You might bite, but I do not. He's in a safe zone as long as he's in my vision. So kindly request the brothers to move forward. Sisters, please congregate together. So I would like the sisters to sit in like maybe 2-3 rows together so that we're able to participate and discuss. Inshallah. Okay. 5 pillars of Islam. What an amazing choice of theme. I'm sure all the speakers also began with this, but we cannot overemphasize the importance of these 5 pillars in our religion. Right? We learn it growing up, and then we think we're done with it. But no, we need to keep coming back and relearning them and advancing in them. Because as we progress through different stages of life, different things will catch onto us in a more impactful way. If you were 8 years old and you learned about Zakat in your middle school class, you're just like, what is this? Now as college students, learning about Zakat will be a different experience. And it was funny enough, my friend, my great friend and my designated driver for today, Huraira, may Allah bless him and reward him immensely for sacrificing his time and being with us here today. Everyone say Ameen. I want to raise your hand. He's already married, so it's taken. So we were joking about it, like, when are you guys going to do things like that? All these college students, like, I remember my days in college, Temple University in America, tuition is so high, and you're already broke, you have things that you're paying for, you don't know how you're going to get your next meal. It was challenging times, right? And then I joked, I was like, nah, these guys are from Nottingham. It's a pretty good university, inshallah, they're well off, they're from good families. Irrespective, if this is not applicable to you today, it will be very applicable to you, inshallah, in the near future. Inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant all of us halal income and strong wealth so we can support ourselves and our family and the ummah. And as I was joking about it with Huraira, another idea hit me. How do I make this more applicable to college students? Like, they're not going to be sitting down and calculating zakat sheets So how do I make this interesting for them? And the idea came across, why don't we talk about wealth from a broader perspective first, right? What is the Islamic understanding of wealth? What does money mean to me as a Muslim? So when we understand that, then the ahkam and the principles and the legislation of zakat makes a lot more sense. So that's going to be the premise of the talk initially, and then we'll delve into the later discussions of zakat itself, inshallah. First and foremost, disclaimers, this is not going to be a fit class. I'm not going to get into every single detail, so please do not quote me of anything you learned from here. It's all very good information, but it does require further research. I'm giving you the tools to start asking the right questions and start doing your own research in the right way. So inshallah, when it comes time for you, you are able to fulfill the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best of ways. And it's not a motivational speech, right? And in the beginning it will be trying to understand the concept of wealth, but at the same time it is a bit technical. So this is why I made a presentation. If you start dozing off, just open your eyes and look up at the screen so you'll know where we left off. And I'm sure, inshallah, you won't doze off because I forgot to put another disclaimer on there. This is not a khutbah. I will be actively asking questions, hence why I asked you guys to move forward and congregate together. So if I ask a question, you're allowed to speak, right? So Jummah khutbah was an afternoon, this is evening time. Inshallah, you guys all have energy. I was joking about this to Herrera as well. The third disclaimer that needs to go up there, fourth. This is close to my bedtime. Alhamdulillah, I was blessed with a newborn baby, and my clock now revolves around his clock, and he has no clock. So whatever opportunity I get, I sleep. So right after Isha, we try our best to put the baby to sleep. He falls asleep, we fall asleep. The fifth disclaimer, I drank it, so I have this caffeine hype, and if I start speaking too fast, Herrera will go like this to tell me to just slow things down. And at some point, I will get up and start moving around. So dear respected camera person, your name, brother?
Abdullah.
Abdullah. I will not let you sleep. That's my promise. All right. I think that's enough disclaimers. Let's jump into it. First and foremost, we talked about the importance of the 5 pillars, right? These 5 pillars are so essential to us being Muslims, and I'm so appreciative that we're discussing a whole class on the topic of zakat. What usually happens is we keep discussing salah, we keep discussing Ramadan every time, we keep discussing fasting every time Ramadan comes around, Hajj comes around, even we'll talk about Hajj. But casually we'll just gloss over zakat. 2.5% every year, go figure it out, right? It's like a quick pass over. So I'm very appreciative that we're taking the time to discuss the topic of zakat, and then getting a little bit of a deeper understanding. There are 5 maqasid al-sharia. These are the underlying fundamental principles that scholars have summarized of the things that Islam tries to protect. That is all the rulings that we have in Islam, these are extrapolated from that, right? Why are we told not to kill one another? Obvious reasons, but to protect yourself, to protect your progeny. So we're going to quickly read through the 5 maqasid. The first one, hifdhul aql, to protect your intellect. So when we say protecting your intellect, what's one example of a way we protect our intellect?
By not drinking.
By not drinking. What happens when you get drunk? Your intellect gets foggy, and I'm sure none of us have done it ourselves, though we've seen being, I don't know, the situation in Nottingham, but private universities, you go right off campus, it's very visible, right? You can see the type of behavior when people are drunk that they tend to do. The second one, hifdhud deen, protection of our religion. What's something that we do to protect our religion? We pray. We remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often. Right? There are certain things, certain steps that we take to make sure that our religion is protected. If at some point we find that we are no longer able to, that our workplace is telling us you can't pray here, we go back to Hifdhuddin. Hey, should I continue working here if my religion is being compromised? And the next one we move on to, I will skip the middle one, we'll Hifdhun Nafs, right? Protecting the human life. Protecting the human life. And Hifdhun Nasab, this is protecting your lineage. Protecting your lineage. The obvious one for the application of this is getting married. Right? So you know who the child is from, and the lineage is protected. So right in the middle, Hifdhul Mal, preservation of wealth. And a lot of times when we have this discussion of maqasid al-sharia, we tend to focus on the individual. But preservation of wealth, when you're talking about all of these, is actually at the societal level. It's preservation of wealth for the society. What that means is making sure that those that are in the bottom rung are able to move up the ladder. That those that are suffering are able to move out of that suffering, and those that have that wealth, that it continues to be in circulation. And there's a lot of Quranic ayahs that we can discuss and talk about. But we're going to focus the conversation, inshallah, on zakat. So let's move on to the next. Someone famous said this amazing quote, more money, more problems. Right? Is this true or not? Someone says yes. Any deniers? Really? If I have $100,000 and come on, I can live my life so easily. What is the problem with this? What is the problem? Why is this statement true? Abdullah.
You have too many choices to think about how to spend your money.
You have too many choices to think about where to spend your money. How about Islamically? Yes.
How clean is it? The message how halal it is.
How halal is your wealth, right? How halal is the wealth that you have earned? And the second question that comes up is how halal are the things you're spending it on, right? If you only have $50, you're gonna make sure you don't have many avenues to spend it on. When you have so many avenues, you're going to have to make more decisions. Any other thoughts? So, going back to the root of this first, intrinsically, wealth is not evil. I know there are certain religions that say wealth is evil, right? Greed is evil. Wealth in of itself, as Muslims, we do not believe that it is intrinsically good or intrinsically bad. It's how you deal with that wealth, what you do with that money. Right? So we'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit. We can go ahead and move on. But this is the Islamic mindset towards wealth. These are 4 very important pillars that I want all of us to internalize before we begin the discussion on zakat. Wealth is something that we all desire. It is a human desire for wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes this for the human being. That human beings desire wealth, affluence, children, and this is highlighted in the Quran itself. But the first pillar that we have to understand, that my wealth belongs to Allah. Anything that I own is not really mine. I do this with kids, but I'm going to do it with college because you guys are still students, but I want everyone to raise your hand, right? Just look at it for a second. This is your hand. But reflect on it for a second. Is it really yours? Is this hand really mine? For you guys, take out your phone and look at it. Everyone's going to do it really quick. Right? Is this phone really mine? What's the answer? At the end of the day, it might be in your possession, but true ownership is not with you. Right? This hand that I have, it's an amana. This is a, what's the translation for amana? A trust. A trust given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, same analogy goes to your wealth. This wealth, I really do not own it. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted me to use temporarily, and at the end of the day, I'm accountable for how I use it in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am merely a trustee of this wealth. How many ever ringgits that you have in your wallet, they're not really yours. Allah's given them to you in your possession for the time being, but later on, you're going to be held accountable for it. So adding that as our lens for the rest of our discussion changes how we view zakat. Number two, wealth is a test. I will be asked about how I use my wealth. This goes back to the discussion we were having earlier. More money, more problems. The Prophet ﷺ explicitly stated in the hadith that the rich will enter paradise later. Any explanation, any muhadithun here? Why are the rich entering paradise later?
Because they have to account for more.
Yes. Are you an accounting major?
No.
Oh, you should be. What is your major?
It's just foundation.
Okay, foundations. May Allah put barakah in your foundations and allow you to thrive in your pursued career, inshallah. Everyone say Ameen.
Ameen.
Whoever wants du'as needs to answer these questions. So, what was I talking about? Why, yes, more money, more problems. Rich people enter paradise later because they have to be accountable for every ringgit that they've spent. Right? It's a register. Every ringgit that you spent, you're going to be accountable for it. So the register for the rich people will be longer. Poor people will say, I had 1,000 ringgits in my life, spent 10 on food, spent 100 here, spent 200 here, I'm done, I'm entering Jannah. The rich people will be a much more daunting task. Not that we should be afraid of it. We should be cognizant of it, right? We should take it as an onus upon ourselves that, hey, if I'm at Nottingham University, I perceive in my future I will be, inshallah, earning a strong earning. I will be held accountable more than anyone else that pursues anything else in their life. Allah gives with infinite wisdom, and I'm content with what He gives me. If someone is rich, does that mean that Allah loves them? Yes or no?
Doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. Maybe they are. Maybe they.
Exactly. They're not intrinsically correlated, right? Wealth and love of Allah, love from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not hand in hand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses a lot of rich people that do some very disgusting things. They use their money for filthy things, yet Allah keeps giving them. Does that mean Allah loves them? Of course not. Yet we see some of the greatest scholars and some of the most amazing human beings don't have that much wealth. So realize that having wealth is not a litmus test of how much Allah loves you, but it's in Allah's infinite wisdom. And the Prophet ﷺ reminded us to make dua constantly from wealth that would distract our hearts from the akhirah, and at the same token, poverty that would distract us from obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, wealth, being distracted with wealth is kind of easy to understand. We've seen it on TV, it's very easy. You have $1 million, you stop praying, and you're kind of doing other things. But when you are poor, how does that distract you from obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Isn't it kind of the opposite? Wouldn't you be doing more sajda, praying more tahajjud, oh Allah bless me, grant me some more money, grant me some more cars? So how does this work out? Why is it that poverty can push you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Any dua seekers, come on. I need someone from this side. How can poverty push you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yalla, saf al-awwal.
It might push you to steal.
It might push you to steal, right? You become so poor, so desperate, that you are inclined to start taking other people's wealth unjustly. Another factor could be that you're so worried about providing for your family that anxiety overtakes you and you're no longer focused in your prayer, let alone praying at all. Right? These things are very real and it happens. That's why the Prophet made dua and sought protection from it. And the last one, I have an abundance mindset. I feel blessed and not deprived. I want everyone to just feel the clothing. Allah put clothing on you. This, not anyone else's clothing, brother. Please answer yourself. Right? Allah has blessed you with clothing. Allah has blessed you with warmth and comfort. Just be grateful for that. We have watches on our hands, we have backpacks on our shoulders. Our eyesight becomes weak, we're blessed to be able to afford glasses. We're in abundance mindset. As soon as we have that, that's when our frame and perception of Jannah, our perception of this dunya is going to be correct. I'm going to go off on a quick tangent. How are we doing on time? By the way, what's our cutoff? 40. Oh, okay. Bismillah. Okay. This is a story, so you guys will be with me. One of my favorite hadith that whenever I'm asked to do a small talk, I quote this hadith. Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. Very short hadith. If you can remember it, memorize it. If you can in Arabic, if not, then at least English. Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min. This world is a jail for the believer, wa jannatul kafir, and a paradise for the disbeliever. Right? And this hadith, when we look at it at surface level, it seems a little restrictive. It's like, man, I gotta live a rugged life, a jail cell life, I'm gonna be restricted. But rather, I want to frame it in a different way and contextualize this hadith to something that's very relevant for us students here. I'm going to relate it to the college classroom environment. Is this a lecture hall?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we're in this lecture hall. Your professor is giving a lecture about economics, and it's a nice, peaceful environment. That's one side of the token. The other side of the token is what we imagine in American high schools, where everything is going wild. Like, there's paper airplanes flying, there's chewing gum on the seat, there's the chalkboard eraser being thrown. This is the craziest scene that you can imagine in a classroom setting. Now, rhetorical question I want everyone to answer. In which classroom is there going to be success? The first one that's calm and collected, the professor is explaining things, writing things on the board, or the second classroom, which is a whirlwind of activities and chalkboard erasers flying, paper airplanes? One or two? First one. In the same way for the believer, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min, it's not that it's a literal prison, but it's a structure that has, it's a institution that has do's and don'ts, rules and regulations, not because Allah hates us, not because Allah wants Muslims to live a terrible, miserable life, no, but rather because Allah wants us to rise to our full potential. That's why ad-dunya sijnul mu'min, the world is a classroom with rules and regulations for the believers so that the Muslim can rise to their highest level in this world and in the hereafter. You see, when there's no rules and regulations, you have people that are drinking alcohol, committing zina, fighting one another, stealing. Are they going to rise to their full potential? They're probably going to drop out of college and end up somewhere else. Right? What's going to be of their akhirah? Right? And a story relating to this hadith, one of the pious predecessors, this is like 1400 years ago, he's riding on his horse and he arrives at the marketplace. Giant of that time, not hyperpanda, that's in Saudi. What's another common story here? Lotus, or Lulu, like to shop at Lulu. So he arrives in his nice, beautiful white horse, and he steps off into the marketplace, and there's a beggar sitting on the side of the road. He's a poor person in raggedy-taggedy clothes, and he sells oils for a living. And this is a poor man. He looks up. He's a Jewish man, and he looks up at the scholar, and he says to him, "What are you doing? How are you on this nice horse? How are you coming to this nice fancy market? Don't you have a tradition Don't you have a hadith that says, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir"? Isn't there a wording from the Prophet Muhammad that said that this world is a prison for the believers and a paradise for the disbeliever? So what prison are you in and what paradise am I in? The beggar is asking, how are you in a prison and I am in a paradise? When you are the one with the nice horse coming to shop at this nice marketplace, buying whatever you want, living a nice luxurious life. What did the scholar reply back to him? This is the sucker punch, right? The climax of the story, he tells this poor Jewish man, he says, compared to what Allah has in store for me in the hereafter, this dunya is a sijn. This one horse that I have doesn't compare to the 10 Cadillacs that I will have in the hereafter. The one house that I own doesn't compare to the mansions that I will have in the hereafter. As for you, this life that you're living is paradise compared to the punishment you will face in the hereafter. So this man was humble and he accepted Islam. He realized that wealth is not in dollars and ringgits, rather it's in perception and mindset. True wealth is beyond what the monetary value is. True wealth is a whole lifestyle, and true wealth is akhirah, right? Paradise in the hereafter. Oh, well, going back really quickly. I have to nag on the Desi community. I'm Pakistani originally, so I have the luxury to do this. I'm sure Arabs have this as well, and I've seen it, but it's not as prevalent, okay? So I apologize in advance, but we cannot have the opposite of abundance, the deprivation mindset. A very easy example, when you go to the dentist, sometimes, I don't know why they do this at the dentist first and foremost, there's a box of candy, a little jar with candy inside it. Okay? So the deprivation mindset says, let me take a handful, right? I'll give it to my kids' kids, their aunties and everyone, and it's free, right? Abundance mindset says, hey, let me take one for myself, one for the person that's with me. This is abundance because you know that there's more to come your way. There's more, that you're leaving some for the rest of the people. When someone gives you a hand, you don't take the arm, right? It's have this mentality that there's abundance. Allah will provide. It's not going to run out. The food opens. Anyone been to a Desi wedding, Pakistani wedding? The food opens. There's like a charge at the food. That's not abundance mindset. The food will not run out. Allah has your specific rizq written for you, and you will get more and better. And understanding that rizq is written, it's something that's destined. What's meant for you will reach you. What's not meant for you won't ever get it, no matter how hard you try. Right? Moving on. So jumping into zakah, it's a religious levy on wealth, right? And zakah comes from the root word zakah, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, right? The person who has succeeded is the one who has purified themselves. Zakah coming from that same root word that we're all striving for. We all want this success. So it comes back to how do we obtain that success, and one of the core ways of doing that is purifying your wealth. As Muslims, we are required to purify ourselves in every way. We're required to purify ourselves physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and monetarily. In every way possible, we must purify ourselves, and part of purifying our wealth is giving this form of giving. Now, in America, this is a common definition of charity. The quotation, is a common definition of zakah, and the quotation marks there. Can anyone point out what the problem is? What's the problem in that definition? It's a little bit technical, so any English majors will figure it out. I slipped up and I accidentally gave a hint, so if anyone was paying attention.
Cleanse.
What's that?
There's not an A in cleanse.
Oh, the spelling? No. Mandatory charity that Muslim gives. Muslims must give anyway. No. So I'll give it away. I don't want to spend too much time. It's not a charity, right? Charity is something you do voluntarily, and then it's kind of contradictory to say it's mandatory charity. Charity is something that you give voluntarily. This is not something that I have a decision on. It's something that I have to do as a Muslim. It's not my wealth. It's Allah's wealth, and the poor have a right to this amount of wealth. And it's also, the definition comes in purification as well, and nama, growth, increase. Very commonly, we discussed this last time, cause and effect. We think that when we do something, there's going to be an expected outcome. So logically, if I have 100 ringgits in my pocket and I give 50 of them away, I am down 50 ringgits, I only have 50 ringgits left. But that's not the Islamic paradigm, right? There's a number of hadith that I can quote where it shows that whatever we give does not actually decrease. So when we give zakah, it's not decreasing, it's increasing. It's increasing. A hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he sacrificed a goat to be, he sacrificed a goat, right? And he asked Aisha radiallahu anha to prepare the goat, to cook it. And Aisha radiallahu anha is getting ready, preparing everything. And the day passes by, and the Prophet ﷺ comes and says, "What's left of the goat?" And she says, "Only the shoulders." What happened in the meantime? People came, and she gave it as charity. She kept giving it away. The different parts of the goat, she kept giving it away as charity. So at the end of the day, when the meal was cooked, all that was left was the shoulders. And she said, only the shoulders are left. So the Prophet ﷺ, what was his reply to this? Yes, Abdullah. Oh, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand.
I'm moving.
Go ahead, brother.
The shoulder is gone.
Yes, everything else is still there. Everything else is still there. Why? He was counting the akhirah. And he was counting the blessings that were going to come. Right? This relationship of cause and effect is something that we're indoctrinated with in our educational system. We're told when we earn this amount of salary, we can afford this amount of house, and we can drive this type of car. When we study X amount of hours, we can pass this exam, and so forth. But that's not how the paradigm of the Muslim works. There's a factor of barakah. I could spend another hour defining barakah, but it's basically growth in an unexpected way that comes as a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? You may still only have 50 ringgits in your pocket, but what does it mean when there's barakah? What does it mean when there's barakah in that 50 ringgits? Can anyone give me an example? What does it mean when there's barakah in those 50 ringgits?
It would last for many days.
Yes. You might have 100 ringgits, but you'll blow it off in one day. But when you have 50 ringgits with barakah, it will last much longer. It may last much longer. You may be able to do much more with those same 50 ringgits. What was that? It lasts 3 days instead of what? Let's continue. Okay. Is zakat required? How do we know? How do we know zakat is required?
It's a verse in the Quran.
It's a verse in the Quran. It's a verse in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to give zakah, and oftentimes it's paired with what?
Salah.
Salah. Salah. And alhamdulillah, we had the pillar of salah, was it last week or the
Last week.
last week? So we all know the importance of salah. How integral salah is, that if you're not praying your salah, it's problematic, very problematic, right? Same thing with zakah, it's an obligation. If it's paired with something just like salah, that shows how important it is, right? But the placement of it in the Quran is very important. It's obligated in the Quran. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "Bunya al-Islamu ala khamsa." Islam is built upon 5, and amongst those 5 is the hadith about zakah and ijma', right? It's a consensus upon from the scholars that zakah is required. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم خذ من أموالهم صدقة تطهرهم وتزكيهم بها وصل عليهم إن صلاتك سكن لهم والله سميع عليم. This is Surah Tawbah, ayah 103. And the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, O Prophet, take alms, fancy word for charity, take funds out of their rich and thereby cleanse them, out of their riches, and thereby cleanse them and bring about their growth in righteousness and pray for them. Indeed, your prayer is a source of tranquility for them. It's a really interesting point towards the end, but it's khudh, right? It's a commandment. Take from their riches. Min amwalihim sadaqatan. Although the Quran verse mentions the word sadaqah, over here it's unanimously agreed upon that we're talking about a very specific type of sadaqah, which is zakat. We all know what sadaqah is. It's a broader category of goodness, specifically financial goodness. Within that broader subject of sadaqah comes zakah, which is a very specific form of sadaqah that is mandated upon the Muslims. What does it do? تُطَهِّرُهُمْ. It will cleanse them. وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا. It will bring about their growth. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Right? It elevates them and brings them higher in the hereafter. وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. The Prophet is commanded to pray for the people that gave zakah. He's basically, we are deserving the Prophet ﷺ's prayer if we make this, if we fulfill this obligation. Excellent. And it's a right of the poor, right? It's a right of the poor. And one second, before we do the next click. What happens if you don't pay zakah? You are sinful, right? You are sinful. Now a bigger question happens, and I want to frame this in the correct way, so I'm going to choose my words very carefully. What happens if you deny zakah being an obligation? Let me ask again. The first question is, what happens if you don't pay zakah? You are sinful. The second question is a little different, but pay attention to the phrasing. What happens if you deny that zakah is an obligation? You are? Allah. Is that your final answer? He said you leave the fold of Islam, and his answer is correct. You are officially, not officially, you have done something that is tantamount to kufr. Right? You have done something that takes you out of the fold of Islam. This is a very big deal. And this happened. This happened. Who did it happen with? Does anyone know? From the sisters, we haven't heard anything. How did this happen in our history before? It is a bit far, so you might have to speak up. Did this happen before? Did anyone in Islamic history ever deny the obligation of zakah?
I think it was in the period of Abu Bakr also.
MashaAllah. It happened in the era of the first Khalifa. The first Khalifa, after he gains control of after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, the first Khalifa is challenged with this huge undertaking. Right? Do you know what the name of what it was called? Ridda. Huruba Ridda. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the first Khalifa, once he becomes Khalifa, he tries to continue on the same trajectory as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the norm of that was to collect zakah. The norm of that was to collect zakah, and these populations of Muslims, they came up and they said, hey, we're not paying it. We're not paying it. Why? They quoted the ayah of the Quran, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً. The ayah khudh is to the Prophet. You're not the Prophet. You're the Khalifa. We don't need to pay. Who said this? The tribe leaders of Muslims in kind of further away lands that accepted Islam almost to be politically aligned. Many of these tribes had just accepted Islam more recently, and they had done it because everyone else was accepting it and they didn't want to be ostracized, and it was economically better for them. That was the majority of the case. So they quoted this ayah, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. O Prophet, take from their wealth. You're not the Prophet, we don't have to pay. So what was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's response? What does Habib do? He waged war on them. He said, you are denying something that is from the fundamentals of Islam. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was challenged at this time. Some of the Sahaba said, hey, Abu Bakr, look, we're new to this right now. The Prophet just passed away. We are in a state of a bit of a disarray. The new leadership is being established. Are you sure this is the first thing you want to pursue? Is getting these people to pay zakat? We're not financially needy. I think we should focus on getting the affairs of the Muslims together. And there are prominent Sahaba that were discussing this with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. What was Abu Bakr's response? I quote, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, I swear by Allah, if they withhold just something as small as the reins of a camel, of that which they used to give the Prophet ﷺ, I would fight them for it. Why is he being so stern about this? Because it's a fundamental pillar of Islam, and it highlights to us how important it is. If Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is ready to go to war on the principle of zakah, it shows how important it is. It's not that he needed that rein for the camel or that little bit of finances. No, it was the principle. Because if you compromise on this, then who knows what else would be compromised on in the religion. They would say, oh, we don't need to fast in the month of Ramadan, Prophet's not here, and so forth. Who owes zakah? There's a relevant question for you guys. Any Muslim who has reached nisab, and we're going to discuss that, and a lunar year has passed, right? So there are 3 conditions. You must be free. Alhamdulillah, we're all free. You have to have, the source of wealth must be halal. If I have $1 million from selling pork, do I have to give zakah on it? Even if I'm Muslim, I don't have to give zakah on this because it's not halal wealth. You can't purify something that's dirty already to begin with. The purpose of zakah is to purify, right? It's like me taking a shower with a Sprite bottle. I'm not going to get any cleaner. This is going to attract more filth, right? You have to have sanity. Backtrack. Sanity and age are not a criteria, right? So if I am 13 years old and I have been blessed with 200,000 ringgits, I have to give zakah on that, or my caretaker has to give zakah on that on my behalf. I'm someone that's not mentally stable. My caretaker or whoever is providing for me still has to give zakah on my behalf. All right. And what is nisab? It is a minimum amount of wealth that makes zakah wajib. What is zakah? What is the nisab? It is 20 mithqal. It's about 85 grams of gold. And I was looking at it in 2022 for the area here, Selangor. It was approximately 20,000 ringgits, 19,000 ringgits. So if you have 20,000 ringgits and above, you have to give zakah if you're using the gold standard. There's 2 ways to discover what nisab is, the gold standard and the silver standard. Back in the day, they were much closer together, and nowadays it's very, very far apart. So the gold standard is 20 mithqal, the silver standard is 200 dirham. Gold standard, we're looking at 20,000 ringgits. And then for the silver standard, it's $500. I think that's about 2,000 ringgit. So 20,000 to 2,000 ringgit. It's a big difference, right? Now I'm going to ask a very important question. In Malaysia, backtrack. The current practice in Malaysia, and this is what we're going to follow, is that the gold standard is used. The nisab, who has to pay zakah? Anyone that has over 20,000 ringgits saved up. If you use the silver standard, it's anyone who had how much ringgits? 2,000 ringgits, okay? Now, I'm not going to give you any more information, but I want you to discuss it with the 5 people next to you, so within your row. Should the Muslim Ummah, from a theoretical perspective, use the gold standard or the silver standard? What are the pros and cons, right? You guys can work together. Ladies, please make 2 groups and discuss it. What's the pros of using the silver standard, and what's the cons of using the silver standard? So groups of 3, groups of 4,
with the
What difference does it make if a different standard is used?
okay. The quantum less people actually do. Yes. Okay. And the sense is that more people will be giving.
So I mean, it might depending on
No, but the thing itself is like 2,000
so that you
Okay, wait.
Silver standard is it's like annual saved
Two brothers in the back. I started to call you up. Come forward, come forward. I asked everyone to do it earlier. These guys are lonely. They need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
MashaAllah, he's writing his thesis on it, whether it should be the gold topic, the gold standard or the silver standard. We'll give one more minute and then we'll see what the outcome was. The question is, should we use the silver standard or the gold standard?
Okay, yeah. More poor people.
Sisters, we're going to start with the sisters, so please have an answer ready.
So there'll be a lot of people falling into it. Yeah, in 2000, New Year, minimum to. Yeah. So, that's pretty. No, 2000, yeah, oh, I forgot. It's not 2000.
you have to have that just for you.
Yeah, 2000 divided by 12, how much is it? About 200. You can't. I think it's additional savings. But they already have them.
Is that like 2,000 ringgit saved up at the end of the year, or is that 2,000 ringgits a month?
Same time. I should have explained everything before and then asked the question. Anyways, let's see what answers we got, just for a hypothetical, right? I still debate this with my teachers and my colleagues, if the gold standard should be used or the silver standard, and I'm interested, genuinely interested, because there are very strong arguments for both sides. So from the sisters, what's the consensus? Or give me one pro of the silver and one pro for the gold.
They have it, but they're not using it. What's up?
Oh, that's different.
Most of our sisters discussed this, and we compared the time of the Prophet, the Prophet's time as well as now the current time. So the census here were that during the Prophet's time, the value of gold and silver were approximately the same. It wasn't that different now the way it is. So currently there's a huge difference between the gold and the silver. So I mean, there was a bit of a discrepancy here. Like some of them were like, if we have the wealth, like if we have 20,000 ringgit, why not? Why not go for the wealth of gold? But then like some of us who are thinking that who don't have 20,000 ringgits and we do still want to give zakat, inshallah, I mean hopefully we all will have 2,000 ringgits at least. So we can give zakat from that since it is an obligation to us.
Because some people just
Alright.
have enough money to live themselves.
Let's go with one group from the guys. Bismillah. You already volunteered. Someone volunteered for you. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For the sum of gold, I think, because gold is stable, unlike silver, so I think the sum of gold is better. Because it's stable, unlike silver.
Excellent. Barakallah. From the brothers here, anyone? What are the implications if we use a gold standard?
Brother Rifat will answer.
To be honest, I'm so confused about the calculations. I don't understand.
Okay, so we'll circle back to this question. Actually, let me give my 2 cents here. Okay, the silver standard or the gold standard? The pro of the silver standard, if you make the nisab lower, more people will be giving zakat. right? When the threshold is 2,000, a lot more people will be giving zakah, and what more wealth will be circulating hypothetically. Now, if you make the standard higher, fewer people will be in that category, and less wealth will be circulated. Less mandatory wealth will be circulated. That's one side of the argument. The counter argument: I'm still broke if I only have 2,000 ringgits in my bank account.
Yes.
Right? Rent is 1,900. My utilities bill is, I don't know, my kids are using, they're playing Xbox and they're running the TV, the aircon is running 24/7, 700 ringgits. If I have 2,000 ringgits in my bank account, I'm not that rich. So we understand the argument here, right? But if you make it 20,000 that you had for the entire year, you had some substantial savings. So there's both sides of the argument, but for practicality, what happens in Malaysia and what happens in a large portion of the world is the gold standard. So when it comes to deciding what the nisab is, the government has done that for you. You don't need to be faqiz on your own. The ijtihad has already been done. Leave it to the scholars, but this was an academic exercise. What are the implications of zakat, right? How do we maximize the output of using this wealth? Yes?
So now I have a question. Let's say I have assets worth 20,000. So
Pay for the assets? Or?
We're going to talk about it. This is my fault. I misoriented the slides, but let's finish the discussion on nisab first, and then we'll get to your question, inshallah. Nisab is the baseline threshold. If you have this much value in assets that you have saved up and you had for the entire year, it's not that you had it at one point, but you had that amount saved up in your bank account for the entire year. Now zakah becomes mandatory upon you, right? We're going to get into further details and it will make a lot more sense, but that's the basic premise of it, right? If you had nisab and hala alayhi al-hawl, a whole year passes by, then zakah becomes obligatory upon you. Next slide. Now, what does it mean that I had this much wealth? There are classical books would categorize this into 4, but I did it into 5 for simplicity's sake. Gold and silver and all currencies by their extension, right? It was a big debate when the paper currency came out. Is it actually considered something as a zakatable asset? It's paper, but obviously it's there's no discussion now. It's a unanimous agreement that gold, silver, and all currencies are included in this category of zakatable assets. Now, if you have some money in Maybank, some money in CIMB, what does that mean? You have to combine that. You have to combine that total value, and that's how much money is in your total assets, right? Business commodities. May Allah bless us all with successful businesses, but this is business commodities, things that you are trading, and you had stock of that for 1 full year. That's what zakah is due upon. Livestock, you have to give zakah, but it's on a large amount. When you have 40 sheep, and one of them is zakatable now, right? So it's on a large amount of animals. If you have a couple chickens, a couple cows at home, that's not something to be worried about in terms of having to pay zakah on it. Agriculture produce. And I'm listing these off as an academic exercise, and for you to understand and conceptualize, because historically things were very different. But at the same time, realize the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That this system was placed 1400 years ago, and is still so applicable today to us, and it's so relevant to us today. Right? When we talk about agriculture, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a distinction. The agriculture that you produce with providing the water for it, providing irrigation for it, you have to pay less zakah on it. Versus the agriculture that grows just by natural rainfall. You see there's a difference. With one, you have to put a lot more resources in providing for those plants to grow. In the other one, it happens naturally. So as a gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you give more zakah on that. And the zakah for agriculture is a bit different. It's not annually. It's upon the harvest. I'm giving you these details for you to understand and conceptualize, because there's still actually a large amount of agriculture produced around the world, right? And it's not upon the year, because that would be detrimental to the population. It's upon the harvest. So when the harvest happens, those ushr, a tenth of that harvest, is supposed to go to zakat. So immediately, let's say there's wheat produced in the country, that a tenth of that wheat is given to that immediate population right there. Imagine what that does for the communities that are impoverished. And if it's irrigated from your own resources, a fifth, sorry, not a fifth, half of a tenth, or half of a tenth would be
1 over 20.
No, it would be half. I'm an accountant, so I'm messing up in math. Half of an ushr would be 0.05, so 5%. Correct? Yes. Okay. And then rikaz, this is something, may Allah bless us all with opportunity, but it's treasure or natural resources. Many scholars have done qiyas and included that in there. If natural resources are found in the earth, there is zakat due upon them as well. So again, the most relevant one for us is your bank accounts, right? Gold, silver, and those other currencies that we have. What is not included in zakat are your personal items, right? Things that you are currently using, things that are that you are immediately using for your livelihood and your existence. Is there zakat on my car? Yes or no? Easy question. No. Is there zakat on my apartment? No. Okay. Is there zakat on my sofa? No. Okay. But now if I got into a business of selling sofas, right? I have a stock of sofas. Now is there zakat on that? Yes. Yes. Okay. Very easy to distinguish. If I'm using it, no zakat on it. If I'm selling it, there's zakat on it. And the last one is a touchy area. Is there zakat on gold that women wear as jewelry? Right? There's a fiqhi discussion about it. Again, my opinion is that there is, because there's clear hadith that indicate that there is, and there are opinions that are backed by hadith as well that it is not included in zakah. But I encourage, again, follow your local scholars, and if there's a hukum from the country, follow that, right? We have to follow the laws of the land as well. If you move to a new jurisdiction and you have the freedom, research the topic and give zakah accordingly, inshallah. And the hadith of Salama, the wife, one of the Prophet ﷺ saw gold on the hands, and he asked, "Have you given sadaqah on this?" And she said no. And the Prophet ﷺ said that there's severe warning for those that don't give sadaqah, that give zakah on this, i.e. to the gold jewelry. But again, there's arguments on both sides. Follow the law of the land. Moving on. All right. So how do we assess our zakah? It's 2.5% if we're using the lunar calendar, right? Which is the common practice. If you're following the solar calendar, why is it a different percentage?
It's different.
There's different number of days. There's different number of days. Obviously, you're supposed to follow the solar calendar, but if for some reason, for business purposes, you need to follow the Gregorian calendar, you would use the different percentage. As I mentioned, Nisab and Silangor, about 20,000, just shy of 20,000. It is, and one of the ways of calculating it is based on the lowest balance in this savings account, right? Let's say you have a saving account with Maybank, and you've reached this nisab, 20,000. You have 25,000, and throughout the year, this 25,000 was there. It went up, it went a little lower, but it never fell below 20,000. And that would mean that you are obliged to give zakah on it. As I mentioned on the screen, this is one of the ways of doing zakah on this, of calculating the lowest balance. You look throughout the year what the lowest balance was, and you pay on that. The method that I follow, and a lot of other scholars have followed, is paying it on the particular day that you have set to pay, deciding the amount based on the particular day that you have decided to give zakah. So let's say, hypothetically, I decide that I want to give zakah on the first day of Ramadan.
Almost 20,000.
So on the first day of Ramadan, I will look at the savings amount value, and I will give it on that day without any hila. without any tricks. So it won't be like 3 days before I withdraw the entire amount and I say, hey, I have zero, or I'll give it to a loan to my buddy as a loan, right? Or I'll do a crazy purchase that wasn't really necessary and then I'll do a refund, right? That's not how zakat works. You're not tricking anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing. And this happened in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where someone would lend their sheep to their neighbor and say, I don't have the full amount that is zakatable. But again, it's recognized it's a problem. You're not deceiving anyone except yourself. And you're depriving yourself of the ajr that would come. And the reason that this second method works is the law of large numbers, right? Eventually, throughout the 40-year cycle or however long you live, inshallah, you live beyond 40, but the law of large numbers says that cumulatively, you'll have paid an average mean amount within your zakah because you paid on a very particular date, even though your balance sheet fluctuated, your zakatable assets fluctuated, the law of large numbers says that it will be an average by the end of your life cycle. Moving on. Another very important discussion is who will I give the zakat to? Now that I realize I owe zakat, who do I give zakat to? There's a Quranic ayah in Surah At-Tawbah, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ. I encourage everyone, jot down this number, 960. Memorize this. As a Muslim, you are required to know the rulings for everything as it becomes obligated upon you. I must know how to pray salah by the time I hit puberty and earlier. I must know, if I'm going to business, I must know the rulings of business in order to get into business. As I earn wealth, I must know the rulings of zakah in order to fulfill this obligation. I'm going to get very practical. If I want to get married, I must know the rulings of marriage in order to get married. So you don't have to memorize this, but I encourage all of us to please try to memorize this ayah because it's relevant for you. It's relevant for you as a Muslim. Number one, the poor. Number two, the needy. Al-fuqara wal-masakin. What's the difference? This is not a khutbah, let's have some discussion. What's the difference between poor, what's the difference between fuqara and masakin?
I think fuqara are just the poor ones. Masakin are who have either of their parents lost, who don't have their.
That's one opinion. That masakin are those that have lost their parents. Any other? Yes, excellent. The majority of scholars have defined it the way the brother had mentioned it. May Allah bless him and increase him in his knowledge. Al-fuqara with nothing. We're talking about like zero, right? Very low on the economic ladder, meaning they don't have the daily needs being met. Some of the scholars define it as half the necessary needs, less than half the necessary needs. And masakin are those that have the bare minimum, but they're struggling to get by. They have an apartment, but they're struggling to pay their bills. They're struggling to put food on the table. Right? They have shoes to wear, but they're struggling to pay for proper clothing in the winter. That's the distinction that scholars have made. Moving on to number three, zakah administrators. Long discussion on this, but the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran and through the Sunnah and the Quran, a very strong precedence is set that work can be paid for even though it's charity work, right? We don't need to expect volunteer heroes. We can financially compensate those that are putting their time, energy, and resources in making the world a better place, right? So the people that are dispersing the zakah, they are eligible for a portion of that zakah money itself in order to facilitate this growth. All right. Number four, those whose hearts are to be reconciled. وَالْمُؤَلَّفَاتِ الْقُلُوبُ. So this is the category. The Prophet ﷺ, in one narration, after the Battle of Hunayn, gave a large amount of zakah money to the tribes, the non-Muslim tribe leaders. Why did he do this? To soften their hearts towards Islam. In one narration, the Prophet ﷺ gives an entire valley of sheep You have a lot of valleys in Malaysia, so you know what I'm talking about. A valley of sheep, right? This is a lot, like thousands of sheep, and he gives it as sadaqah to the chieftain, and the entire tribe becomes Muslim. The entire tribe becomes Muslim. So there's a little bit of a disagreement upon this, if it's still applicable to us today, because in the time of Umar radiallahu anh, he made a statement. He said that this is no longer applicable because we are no longer weak. We have izzah, we have strength. We don't need to we don't need to soften the hearts of the disbelievers to make them come towards Islam. We are, as a state, we are very strong. We don't need this this quote-unquote protection by going through these offerings. Irregardless of the opinion, it's applicable to the state. If the government decides to use the funds in this way, that's their prerogative. And I don't think it's very relevant in Malaysia. I'm not sure what the common practice is. I feel a little under-researched. I prepared the topic of zakah and wealth, but I didn't get a chance to do as much research as I should have on the Malaysian context. But again, وَأَلَّفَتِ الْقُلُوبُهُمْ, this is towards softening the hearts of the non-Muslims. Softening the hearts of non-Muslims. Personally, in America, we do not give zakah towards this category, although we live in a non-Muslim land. But the scholars majority of the scholars have said that this is not an applicable area because the need for those other areas is greater. Number 5, those in bondage, slaves and captives. Not so relevant, inshallah. We don't experience slavery in Malaysia. The debt-ridden. Those that are overburdened by debt. Right? And this is not any debt. This is a very specific type of debt. Herrera goes out and buys a Ferrari on a debt. Can I give my zakah money to Herrera?
Yes.
Herrera says yes. Anyone else agree with him? No, he's financing a Ferrari. So you cannot give it to him. In the cause of Allah, fi sabilillah. And the last one, wabn sabil, the wayfarer. And the wayfarer is someone who was traveling and they are cut off from their resources. Right? Back in the day, this was a real problem. You could be a millionaire, but you end up in a land and you don't have your $1 million with you. There's no bank card, there's no ATM, there's no big pay. All the other services didn't exist. So you had a real challenge where, although you had wealth, you had no access to it, so you needed this financial support in order to survive. And the cause of Allah, fi sabilillah, is a big problem in America because we have, unfortunately, pulled this to a new extreme that is very wrong and problematic. The explicit definition of this, and I didn't want to write this on the slides in case we're being monitored, is in fighting, right? In weaponry and enforcing the strength of the Muslims. And some scholars extended this a little bit, and they said into knowledge, jihad fil ilm, right? And the causes that support the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, what happened now, fi sabilillah, we said anything that's in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Building a masjid, zakah money. Voting in the political party, fi sabilillah. This seriously happened in America. Muslims gave zakah money to the Democratic Party. Someone crazy gave it to the Republicans. Right? This happened to Republican candidates to fund their political campaign. Is this fi sabilillah? If you use a broad term, yes. But if you use it in the historical context, in the context the scholars understood it, fi sabilillah is very constrained. And I'm hearing stories in Malaysia as well where it has been stretched a little bit. And my personal view and the view of majority of scholars is that it is constrained, and it shouldn't be this open door of anything that's a good prerogative, but rather it should be a very nuanced approach that fills the criteria that zakah was originally mandated for. So these are the 6 criteria of who is eligible to receive zakah. Next slide we're going to discuss, we'll have the Q&A, if you could just jot down the question. I apologize. He gave me a timer and I was like, oh man, I was relaxing in the beginning, going on stories and tangents. We're going to speed through it a little bit, so we'll have the questions in the end. We'll come back to the slide.
It's just one line.
Bismillah.
Are there 6 groups or 8 groups? Because you said 6 groups.
I apologize if I misspoke, but it's listed as 8.
It's 8.
Yes. And I counted 8 in the ayah as well. Is yours brief or a bit longer? There's a question here, right? Well, is it okay if we push it? Yeah. Okay, moving on. Who is not eligible for zakah? Anyone that's dependent on you, you can't give them zakah, right? Because you're kind of benefiting yourself. Your son is dependent on you. Hey, my son's name is Yusuf. He's 1 month old now. Yusuf, here's $2,000. It's yours. And then I just pocket it myself, right? 1 month old and just put it back in my own pocket. Not allowed, okay? Someone that's dependent on you, you cannot give them your zakah money. Explicitly, the way my teachers explained it, anyone in your lineage going up or down. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your kids' kids, and anyone going down. Can you give zakah to your siblings? Yes. Yes, you are allowed to give zakah because it's horizontal. You are allowed. Ideally, come on, brothers and sisters, take care of them. This is like, you should not have to give zakah to them. You should be giving them enough gifts and normal charity that they don't need to be recipients of that. But worst comes scenario, yes, you can. Non-Muslims, you cannot give zakah money to non-Muslims, with the exception that we mentioned, mu'allafat al-qulub, to soften the hearts. Again, difference of opinion. Hard no for that, but if the state is doing it, that's their prerogative. The rich, I can't give zakah money to the rich. Okay, very basic. Someone that's capable, a man that's capable of earning but is lazy, I cannot give zakah money to that individual. Right? They must go out and earn and sustain themselves. We don't want to. Zakah is not meant to just create a crutch on society and be a burden on the rich, but it's supposed to elevate and enrich our society and create a stronger ecosystem. The family of the Prophet ﷺ, Banu Hashim, this is a special, specific honor to the family of the Prophet ﷺ, and we cannot disperse the zakah to the family of the Prophet. I don't think it should be a big deal here in Malaysia, but if someone does say that they're from the family of Al-Bayt, you cannot give them zakat funds. The running joke is that all the Sayyids, all the lineage of the Prophet moved to Pakistan. Because every third person is a Sayyid there. Or claims. And some of them are authentic, right? They have the proper lineage, but a lot of them, Allahu A'lam. A lot of shots taken at Pakistanis. I'm Pakistani, I love you all, and Allah protect our nation. Practical application. These are areas you have to look at, right? Your business income, your employment income, your savings, your shares, your gold, your crops, your livestock, your investments. You aggregate all of this and you give zakah on that depending on your situation. Where should zakah begin with? To those that are closest to you. To your I want to say to your immediate economy, your immediate ecosystem. Because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, very famous hadith, as Mu'adh bin Jabal is being sent off to a faraway land to teach the ummah far away about the religion of Islam. What land was that? Anyone know? Yemen. Mu'adh bin Jabal is being instructed. These are the final words of the Prophet to Mu'adh bin Jabal as he is about to go and govern the land of Yemen. He tells him, take money from their rich and give it to their poor. Being very specific on the term of their, of the people of indigenous population there. So it's great that we're sending money back home to our home countries, but there is a priority and a precedent set by the Prophet ﷺ to help your local economy first and foremost. When do I pay it? The common theme is to pay it in Ramadan. Is it required to pay in Ramadan? No. Is there precedent for paying in Ramadan? No. It's not from established sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ used to pay in the month of Ramadan. Rather, it can be done any time of the year. Why a lot of Muslims do it in the month of Ramadan is because deeds are multiplied manyfold in this blessed month. Do I have to disclose that this is zakah money? No, I do not. Right? But I must make the intention. I must make the intention, if I'm giving zakah to this individual, I must make the intention that I'm giving zakah to this individual. I don't need to tell them, but I can't give it to them and then make the decision later on. Like, I gave $1,000 in charity and like a week later, man, I think I'm going to count that as zakah. My balance is a bit low. Right? I can't do that. The intention must be there at the time. What if I have debts? Right? As in the discussion of zakah, we make a differentiation between long-term debts and short-term debts. If I have made a financing agreement that between my siblings, I said, hey, I'm going to buy this car on cash, borrow from each of you 5,000 ringgits to buy this car, and I'll pay you 2,000 ringgits each year. I owe them money, but that's a long-term debt, right? So I will not decrease this in the amount of my wealth in this year, only the amount that is due this year. For example, I have a total debt outstanding of 5,000 ringgits. Just bear with me, it's a little bit technical. Let's say I have 50,000 ringgits, right? I should have wrote this on there, but hypothetical, if you guys are college students, so follow with me. 50,000 ringgits, but I have debt of 10,000 ringgits, right? But this year, I only have due 2,000 ringgits. So from that 50, I'm going to minus 2. I'm at how much? 48. I will give zakat on 48. All right? That's a quick throw in about debts. Is there any more slides? I think this is one more. This is really quickly, it falls under the definition of zakah. You guys should all be aware of it. Zakat al-fitr. All of you, everyone sitting here, has to give it. If you didn't do it, just drop some money really quickly to someone else. Although the fard aspect has already transpired, you should still do it as a kafara to make up, right? You have to give this amount of money as zakat al-fitr, zakat fitra, at the end of Ramadan, before the prayer of Eid. And I added this just as a, because it falls into the discussion of zakat. And the last slide that we're going to have here is advice from Umar radiallahu anhu. Golden advice. College students, take this very seriously. Regarding investing wealth, Umar radiallahu anhu advised, invest the wealth of orphans and your own wealth so that it will not be eaten away by zakah. I.e., invest your wealth, right? You're like, dude, I barely have enough to eat out nicely. Invest, invest, invest. Pay yourself first, right? Not by eating at fancy restaurants, but by investing. Set aside 100 ringgits for later every month. Just, your parents give you an allowance, 100 ringgits each month. Even if it's 10 ringgits each month, create a safety net for yourself. Start accumulating wealth. Why? Not because we're hoarders, no. Because we have the mentality of growth. We want that pool of money to be able to give in sadaqah. We want that pool of money to be able to grow and thrive and have these, and to be in a position of giving, right? The giving hand is better than the receiving hand. In order to get there, in order for zakat to be eligible for us, we have to work hard. We have to aspire to give zakat. You want to be in this category of having 20,000 ringgits in your bank account. It's as simple as that. Aspire to be someone who fulfills all 5 pillars of Islam. Be a complete Muslim, right? You don't want to be 80 years old and thinking, wow, I never have to pay zakah. You didn't get the opportunity to help your Muslim brothers and sisters out in this beautiful fashion. I spoke a lot and a lot more to say. I thought about speaking about Islamic social finance as well, but my time is up. So inshallah, I'll hand it back and Qayyum will discuss on how to proceed, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Ustadh, for the wonderful and insightful talk. Inshallah, we'll move on to the next section of the event, which is the quiz. So just give us a few minutes to set the quiz up, and we'll continue from there on.
I don't don't waste money and I don't waste time. So let's continue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with how to live our life in a complete way, right? This Islamic approach to wealth will solve the world crisis. Today I talked about only zakat. Within our arsenal, we have other financial institutions that will uplift the ecosystem, that will uplift the economy. Can anyone give me another example of a means within the Sunnah that will help the economy? We're talking about zakah, we're talking about waqf. What is a waqf? Does anyone know what a waqf is? Everyone should know what a waqf is, right? This is the pride of Muslims. This is something that's empowered us for generations, and we need to continue uplifting the ummah through this. Please join the Kahoot, 686-2572. We have waqf. What else do we have? If you don't know these words, Google it. Write it down in your notes and Google it. Zakah, zakat al-fitr, waqf, sadaqah. Any other social finance, Islamic social finance institutions? What do we have for inheritance? What do we have? What's the Arabic word for inheritance? Mirath, right? Islam doesn't just let you die and everyone fights over your wealth. There's a very just way of distributing the wealth so that it preserves your family and the community. It's a beautiful system. Study it. The Quran has given it to us. Mirath, Wasiya, so many institutions. Islam has given us the solutions. We just have to research it and apply it.
Ustadh, we'll give maybe 15 more seconds for everyone to join and then we'll start inshallah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's start inshallah.
Brother Qayyum, we're always rewarding the top achievers. I think we should punish the bottom. Lowest scorers has to do with 20 jumping jacks.
First question, which maqasid of Sharia does zakat come under? Hifz al-aql, hifz al-din, hifz al-mal, or hifz al-nafs? And the correct answer is hifz al-mal, preservation of wealth. We have Alawi at number 1, and the rest is over there. Second question, true or false? We will not be accountable to Allah for every ringgit that we spend. This is easy, right? Please, no one get wrong answers. 3 seconds. Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi. Someone got the wrong answer. Yeah, but look at the scoreboard. In IAUM only. I don't know who that is, but mashallah. Number 1. Next question. Why is it said that this dunya is jail for a Muslim and paradise for a kafir? Because they need to follow the rules of Allah for their own success, because they have no money, because they have no means to gain knowledge, and just because. 7 seconds, 7 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and the answer is because they need to follow the rules of Allah for their own success. And Alawi back at number 1, and IAM comes down to number 2 again. Right, Muslim. Next question. Question number 4. Why do Muslims give charity annually? Because it decreases them in wealth, because the poor have a right on your money, because Allah commanded it, or because it purifies their wealth. I think the word charity is not correct there. But anyway, there are 3 correct answers: because Allah commanded it, because the poor have a right on your money, and because it purifies their wealth. Let's look at the scoreboard. It's a battle between IAM and Alawi, and IAM is back on top. Next question. Question number 5. Multi-select. How do you know zakat is obligatory? Whenever zakat is mentioned in the Quran, it is paired with salah. It is the third pillar of Islam. It is mentioned in the Quran, or everyone around us does it. And all the answers are correct except for everyone around us does it. Next question, inshallah. Question number 6. What happens if we claim that zakat is not obligatory? We will become richer. We're exempt. And the answer is, if you are taken out of the fold of Islam. If you don't believe zakat is obligatory, you're taken out of the fold of Islam. Easy. Easy is number 1. Next question. Question number 7. What is the nisab? Halal wealth, money that you are owed by others, minimum amount of wealth that makes zakat wajib, or the market price of gold. The definition of nisab is minimum amount of wealth that makes zakat wajib. And easy stays number 1. Next question, inshallah. Question number 8. We're almost there. Why are personal items such as jewelry not zakatable? Because we are using it, because we are planning on selling it, because they are investments, or because we plan on starting a business with them. And the correct answer is because we're using it. We're using personal items.
Ustadh's calling a timeout. So jewelry, although it is a personal item, most of the scholars have said that it is zakah has to be given on it. Jewelry that is gold specifically. If you have rubies, diamonds, platinum, that they're for personal use, there's no zakah on it. But jewelry that's gold, I think even the Shafi'i madhab and the common practice in Malaysia is that it is zakatable. So that would just be the small. You want to remove the word jewelry from the question in the future, inshallah. Barakallah.
Second last question for tonight. How many groups of people are eligible to receive zakat? It's mentioned in Surah number 9, verse 60 in the Quran. 5, 7, 10, or 8? How many groups of people? And the correct answer is 8. 8 groups of people are eligible to receive zakat. No change in the leaderboard. Moving on to the final question of the event. Multi-select. Who is not eligible for zakat? The one who is in debt due to misfortune, non-Muslims, the poor Muslims, or someone who is dependent on you. And the answer is the non-Muslims and someone who is dependent on you. So number 3 for the events, Ryan Goosen. Number 2, Alawi. And the champion for tonight's event. IAUM only.
What happened to this?
And who is IAUM one?
I'm sorry, guys.
The Ustadh's driver is the winner for tonight.
Brother Herrera. Brother Herrera.
Brother Herrera, inshallah, tabarakallah. We forgot to mention the prize for winning the quiz is a grab voucher. So inshallah, we'll pass it on to you.
I think we need to give him some Nottingham memorabilia to make him appreciate the campus.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khairan, everyone. And we'll move on to the next section of the event and the final section of the event, which is the Q&A session. So Q&A session, if any brothers and sisters have any questions for the speaker, you can raise up your hand. Or alternatively, you can ask your question through Pigeonhole. However, physical questions are preferred. So first question, I see Rafat.
The majority of scholars, they are in, they have many different opinions on this, which is cryptocurrency or what is it called, online stock and stuff. So some say haram for some reasons, some say halal for some reasons. And we had a very big, useless debate in some way, whereas some said that if the income is haram from the online stocks, for example, I invest in Samsung, let's say, So Samsung, they have haram shares and haram stuff in their company. And if your father is working in Samsung, then his earnings or salary is also haram, because it's the same company. So what do you say about this?
All right, very loaded question. It's a lot of background discussion that needs to happen. So first and foremost, the scholars have devised a very specific way of screening stocks. We live in a very complicated economic environment. Zakat is simple, but it gets complicated as the economy gets more complicated. The application of it gets more complicated. So when it comes to financial stock screening, first and foremost, there's a very complex methodology that the scholars have adopted, and just because a company might have purchased shares in other countries that may be companies that may be permissible, doesn't automatically remove them from being Sharia compliant. There might be there's a threshold for everything. Ideally, we would write them off, right? Anything that even has the smallest amount of impermissibility, we would write it off, but financially and economically, it's not very practical. So the scholars have come up with a threshold of what we would say is still permissible, but we would need to purify our money. Now, when it comes to working in a company that outwardly is permissible, but their financial dealings at a separate end might be problematic, that is not impermissible in of itself, as long as you are, for example, I could be in Samsung in their tech arena, that's perfectly fine, but when I'm in Samsung and I'm the one that's writing their riba contracts, and I'm the one that's making these ribawi payments, all of a sudden it's a little bit more problematic. Or if I'm the one writing the checks to those, the gambling casinos and so forth, and shares, that's problematic. But if I am an engineer or a software programmer for Samsung, it's not problematic for me to be working for that company because their overall operations are permissible. And it does get technical, and you would need to go to scholars for each individual case. But the general premise of the company is permissible, then it would be permissible to work for that company. I hope that answered your question. It is touchy, but it gets nuanced, but you would need to go into specific details of the company to see how bad it really is and what area that person is working in.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. There was a question in the slide, I'm not sure if you answered it or not. It asked if we can pay early for the zakat.
Yes. Barakallahu feekum, I forgot to touch upon that. It is majority of the scholars say that it is permissible to pay early. Let's say, mashallah, you're doing very well. Huraira has 50,000 ringgits of zakat that he has to give. Right? So instead of having to pull that out in one go from his bank account, that might be a little burdensome, he can disperse it throughout the year and keep a tally of it, so that at the end of the year, at the end of the lunar year, he knows that throughout the year he's already dispersed 40,000 ringgits of his zakat that needs to be given, and he only has 10,000 remaining, and he'll make sure he does that before, he'll make sure he disperses that once it becomes due for that year. You can pay it early. Can you pay it late? No. So if you become late, try to pay it as soon as possible. And I'll add a follow-up question because I know it's going to come up and it's something that we should be aware of. If you don't have cash on hand, but you owe zakat, right? Inshallah, you are all in this position later on where you have a large number of assets and you have high net worth, but you might not have cash on hand. So you can liquidate, and this is why you have to plan ahead of time, have zakat planning. For the sisters, it might be applicable. You own jewelry, and you take the opinion that you have to pay zakat on that. You might have 500 ringgits worth of zakat that you have to pay, but you don't have cash. So Either you work for the money, either you ask your husband to pay for it, or you sell some amount of your jewelry and you pay for it. Right? You think of creative solutions, and you make sure you have that cash on hand to pay when that becomes due. And someone can pay on your behalf, right? I have to pay 2,000 ringgits of zakat. I say, hey, Hurera, can you pay 2,000 ringgits of zakat on my behalf? I'll pay you back in 2 weeks. Right? I'm just moving some money around. I need to get the money. I need to get the zakat dispersed, but I'll get it back to you in this amount of time. That is permissible as well.
Yes, the sister has a question.
First of all, Jazakallah khair for coming here and giving us a talk, because I'm very under knowledge on this topic of zakat, because I've never had anyone who discuss this further into detail, so it's kind of enlightening right now. Earlier you touched up on very lightly on the topic of Zakatul Fitr, and may Allah grant us all the opportunity to get to Ramadan fast and be able to pay the Zakatul Fitr. But you mentioned that, if I'm not wrong, you mentioned that Zakatul Fitr, if it hasn't been paid, it should be paid, and if like previously if you never paid it, should it be paid right now? Is it the same way as Salah? But whatever salahs you have missed, or whatever fasting days that you have missed, you have to make up for those things. Does that same be applied to Zakatul Fitr as well?
Barakallahu feekum. Thank you for the question, and I apologize for having glossed over it so quickly. I guess that's the part that's most relevant for most of you. So just to clarify, I'm guessing 90% your parents probably paid it on your behalf. Right? Even if they didn't tell you, they did it for you, just because of how ingrained it is within our culture and our parents' generation. Allah bless them and preserve them. Zakatul Fitr is fard al-ayn it's fard on each individual of the family, and even if it's a newborn baby, Zakatul Fitr would be given on that baby. Some scholars recommended, even if the baby is still in the womb, to give Zakatul Fitr for the unborn baby. The question was, should you give it if it hasn't been given? The obligation of it has kind of, you're overdue, right? And this is just my personal opinion. It would count as sadaqah and it would count as your good deeds. Are you required to do so? There's no exact sunnah that explicitly mentions that you must make it. Like for salah, we know you must make up those salahs that you have missed. For Zakatul Fitr, it's not as clear and cut. So I would advise you to just, it's like, it's 15 ringgits. Like, I remember going to the masjid, I think they asked for 12, but I just rounded up and I handed 15, right? So it's not much. I'm going to do it for the last 5 years, last 10 years. It's still a small amount, inshallah, for all of us. So I hope that answers your question. It's not explicitly mentioned like salah, but it is a form of sadaqah that it will obviously benefit you in the hereafter, inshallah.
I think we talked about, if we're following, let's say we're following the Islamic calendar, it's supposed to be 2.5% of your wealth, but then at some point we also mentioned like 10% if it's agriculture. So yes. Does the amount vary based on the type of wealth, or what?
So yes, it does vary on the type of wealth. So it's different for livestock, agriculture, and currency, right? Currency, we use the hawl, we use the 1 year, right? For livestock, we also use 1 year, but we don't use 2.5%. You're not going to chop a goat and give it 2 legs and say, here's a charity. You give a whole, once you have X amount of cows, X amount of goats, you give 1 for that. For agriculture, again, it's a different nisab and it's a different hawl. It's a different bare minimum, and it's a different, the period is not exact 1 lunar year. For agriculture specifically, it's upon the harvest. And it's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it provides immediate source of food for those that might have a food scarcity.
Okay, barakallahu feek.
And Zakatul Fitr, again, like people might not have money to celebrate Eid. Now you're giving them food, you're giving them rice, and you're giving them some meal that they can at least enjoy eating.
Nice question. Yes.
Barakallah feek, Sheikh. This question is about Islamic finance in general. So there are some Islamic banks that offer a profit rate of return on savings, on the saving account. So how does this differ from a normal interest rate in commercial banks? If you don't mind answering.
So the profit rate, the verbiage of it will be that it's not guaranteed. Right? It's a undertaking that the bank is taking, that they will give you the hiba, a gift of this percent upon you keeping that amount of money in there. The difference becomes where interest is tied directly. It's a guarantee that you are bindingly giving that amount. Although I don't agree with the banking economy and so forth, I do have my qualms with the implementation. This is one of the areas where it is problematic. But that's the premise of it. They're promising you, they're not guaranteeing you, and they will use your money not for loaning out in the conventional sense of making interest. And like what happens in conventional is they give you a 3% return, and they'll use that same money and charge someone else 10% or 20%. This way, in Islamic banking, what they're attempting to do is they're telling you, hey, we're expecting that we're going to have 2.5%, we're going to have expecting X amount of return, and we want to give that to you if we meet those benchmarks. We're going to use this money and try to facilitate Islamically Sharia compliant financial transactions that will give us profit, and we will share those profits with you.
So in that case, does it seem something like murabaha, or is it a bit different?
So there are models that are built on murabaha, where they would use your money and do a murabaha transaction to other institutions, to other borrowers, and share the profit with you. So that is one possible application of it. I am in Islamic finance, and I don't have all the answers, but we all have all the criticisms, right? So it's a work in progress. I'm in the industry. We're trying to find the best way forward. We're trying to grow and identify these areas of grayness, and inshallah come up with proper solutions. But it is great.
Any more questions from the audience, inshallah? I will take one question from the Pigeonhole. The question is zakah applicable on gold you received as gifts as a child?
Audience. Yes. So I turn to the audience. The question, can you repeat it again? Is zakah
applicable on gold you received as gifts as a child?
I'm 5 years old. My grandfather gave me a gold bar. Right? It's nice and heavy. It's definitely beyond 85 grams. Is zakah applicable on it? Yes. Yes. Right? The first category of zakatable assets that we mentioned is gold, silver, and currency. So as soon as you receive that gold as a gift, zakah became obligatory upon you, and your parents would be giving zakah away on your behalf, inshallah.
We'll take maybe 2 more questions, inshallah, maximum, before we end. Yes, Mustafa.
What if a person is into agriculture, livestock, and all of this? Does he need to pay for every asset, or he chooses only one?
If the person is in agriculture and livestock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the nisab is separate. The zakah will be separate for each one. He will have to pay zakah for the livestock, and he'll have to pay zakah for the agriculture, and he will pay zakah on his cash assets as well. May Allah bless you with all three. And the kanz, and the treasures. Come on guys, everyone say ameen for him, and for us as well. He said he doesn't want the livestock.
Assalamu alaikum.
can you please specify on what is the difference between sukuk and bonds? Because government bond they are obviously of riba. But what is sukuk then? If just bonds are from riba, what is sukuk? Like how can we magnify it, and are they zakatable assets?
So I'll answer the first part. The second part, we'll have to do some research on, inshallah. What are sukuk and how does it differentiate from bonds? Very simple answer. They are similar in their end result, but they're different in the way that they're structured. A bond gives you a fixed return based on interest. Sukuk gives you a fixed return based on profits earned from the underlying asset. So, very easy example, we all get together and make a sukuk for building a commercial building, right? So put $1 million in, build the commercial building. As the profits come out, the sukuk will disperse the profits to those investors periodically based on the underlying asset. So the commercial building is generating 100,000 ringgits a year because of the lease, because whoever is using that office space is paying rental revenue. So the sukuk would just be dispersing that to the investors. So it's just a structure to facilitate investment.
Jazakum khairan. Barakallahu feekum. That's the end of the Q&A session for today. And just before we end the event, there are a few announcements.
Can I have some announcements before the announcements? Do you want to go first or should I?
You can go first.
The purpose of this class was not to make you an expert in zakat. There's a lot of technical issues that we didn't get into. The purpose of this class this discussion was to inspire you, to invigorate your thinking, to make you want to learn more about zakat, to make you want to be the people that are giving zakat, to show you how empowering zakat can be if implemented in the correct way. As I was mentioning, this has the capacity to end world hunger. This has the capacity to end poverty, right, if implemented correctly. So we need young minds, we need talent, we need intellectual capacity behind this undertaking to elevate it. Allah has given us the solution here in zakat, and it's something that's wajib that we have to do. Let's do it with ihsan. Let's be the ones that want to give. Ask Allah to make you amongst those that give zakah, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you change the world, help us change the economy that we live in through the keys that Allah has given us, that Allah has already equipped us with. And let's be innovative and be, because there's so many solutions now, right? You can take this zakah into blockchain. You can take this zakah onto the phone and make it digital. Get money to the unbanked, right? Get zakat to those that need it most, who we're not reaching them because we don't have communication with them. But we can find solutions within the parameters, within the tools that Allah has already equipped us with. So if I can end with a dua. Actually, let's make the announcements first and do the dua.
Barakallahu feekum. The first announcement is that for the brothers, every Monday, we have Sirah classes in the masjid between Maghrib and Isha every Monday, so do attend to benefit, inshallah, and learn from the Sirah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And every Wednesday as well for the brothers, we have Quran halaqah every Wednesday after Maghrib in Isha, And in the Quran halaqah, we recite Quran, we learn tajweed, and we go through the tafsir of what ayats we recited on that day. And these are the activities for the brothers. As for the sisters, every Tuesday the sisters have halaqah as well, and they alternate between tafsir and going through the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. And this is between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. for the sisters every Tuesday at the masjid. And for the sisters as well, the sisters next week, inshallah, there is an event that is titled Let's Get Inspired, Seeking Knowledge for Muslim Women. It's going to be given by Sheikh Awafa, and Thursday next week at 8 p.m. in the same venue, F3 812. And last announcement, inshallah, if there are any more questions that we didn't get to answer for today, we have Sheikh Ibrahim, a lecturer in IEM, and we attend his classes every week. His classes are every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. Monday, the Sheikh teaches at Dawah Dawa. Tuesday, Riyadh al-Salihin. Thursday is Tafsir. And on Saturdays, it's Bulugh al-Maram. And at the end of every class, the Sheikh has a Q&A session. So if you want to ask questions or benefit from the Sheikh, you can attend these classes. All these classes are online, on Zoom. However, for the brothers, we do travel to the Sheikh physically every Monday and Tuesday. And further information of going to physical classes will be given in the WhatsApp groups. Bidhnillah, barakallahu feekum. That's the end of all of the announcements. I'll pass it back to the Ustadh.
May Allah bless you all for coming on a Friday night. You could be hanging out, playing volleyball, badminton, doing all sorts of crazy activities, but you chose to sacrifice that and come here. Realize that's a big thing. The amount of ajr you got for sitting here, listening to this boring discussion, really is meaningful in your akhirah. I encourage you to please continue attending these classes, attending these durus. The 5 pillars, we think we know it, but there's so much to learn and so much to grow in. So please continue attending these classes and uplifting yourselves through these gatherings, uplifting your akhirah and your dunya together, inshallah. And this is the company that you will see in Jannah. So be with one another, be there for one another, and continue building strong relationships with your Muslim brothers and sisters so that you can thrive on campus, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unite our hearts on Iman and make beloved to us all things that are loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the evil and the evil that we see on campus, on the fahsha and the negative influences around us. We ask that, oh Allah, we are in a sensitive era of our time. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fortify us and give us strength. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us strength and istiqamah and make us amongst the righteous. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to stay on the straight path despite the many deviations that we experience on campus. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our hearts firm and stay steadfast. We make dua for our brothers and sisters suffering in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them victory and ease their suffering and allow our du'as to be a means of salvation for them and protection for them. Barakallahu feekum. Thank you again, once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And final message, I want to make myself available for you all. If anyone has questions later on, you can personally contact me and get in touch. The only reason I do that is because it's a challenging time to be in the university. It's not easy. You guys go through a lot of weird situations that your Islamic teachers didn't prepare you for, and having a small conversation can be meaningful. So by all means, get my contact information, reach out if there's any challenges you may be facing, any questions you may have. I want to be accessible because of how difficult it can be. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I only travel here because I know the challenges, right? It's not easy being in a university where it's majority non-Muslims. So may Allah bless you all, and that's why I make tons of dua for you guys. So use me as an asset in any capacity I can help. I would be more than happy. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.